Hey guys, Coach Adam from TeamElitePhysique.com talking to you again today with another bikini review. This weekend was a big one. A lot of people talking on the chats about Issa versus Ariana. We had Eureka winning in Japan as well, getting her ticket to the Olympia. So first, let's go ahead and go into the main battle everyone was talking about and jump right into it. Issa versus Ariana. Why did Issa win this time? And why did she win with a perfect score at that? Is she now capable of getting another Olympia title with this package, or is there still more work that needs to be done? Let's jump right into it. So before we jump into Issa versus Ariana, let's go ahead and do Issa versus Issa. Now, this is 1 week difference between the two. Here was her Texas show where she came in a little too hard, a little too lean. And this is show here where she came in a little bit fuller. And now when I say a little bit fuller, it actually looks like a lot fuller. I was talking to her coach over the weekend. He was like, how many pounds do you think she put on from show to show? I guessed about 5 to 6, it looked like, with how much fuller she was. And it was about 3 to 4 is where she ended up. So big difference on the look, but very little difference on the weight when you guys are looking at the actual numbers. So when we get really fine-tuned, when you're fine-tuning someone, you get within a couple pounds of their stage weight, and you know where they need to be kind of perfect. When I'm working with Ashley, you know, I know the difference between 120 and 122 of her look and how much different that look is and how much fuller that look is. Now, this is a new relationship with her and her coach. So they're going to be learning it, and it looks like they're fine-tuning it. I really doubt he's ever going to go with that 3.5 pound lighter look again. Now it's going to be closer to here. So that's what you do when you have a new athlete is you kind of shoot here. We're trying to get a certain look. For her, it was, okay, we got to get her tie-ins to show up. We got to have her glutes be more competitive from the back. The whole thing was tie-ins. Went really far with the tie-ins. She obviously started burning through calories as well at the end and trying to fill her out. And now you're trying to get, okay, here's the weight where she still has tie-ins, where she's still full, where she looks her best. And then you're trying to go back and forth and find that range of how full can we get her without losing the tie-ins? How tight does she need to be to have those tie-ins with sacrificing some fullness? And you're playing this game back and forth until you can really fine-tune it and figure it out. And it looks like they got a lot closer this time. A 3.5 pound jump from show to show, which seems like it's not that much if it was a bodybuilder. But if it's bikini and they're weighing around 120 pounds, 4 pounds or so is a lot of weight. We're talking, you know, a difference of 3-ish% difference in that weight of the body. So that's a pretty big deal at this level of competition. This is not an NPC level. This is a world level. So looking at her from the front, now I will say too, the lighting in the Texas show isn't helping her with being extra hard on top of it. The lighting was really hard at Texas, made her look that much harder when she was already hard. So you could look at different venues that have different lighting scenarios. We have one here in Vegas where in person people will look a lot harder at Alexis Park. And then on video, they'll look a lot softer. So you'll see them be like, man, she wasn't conditioned, but really she was. In Texas, it went the other way. She was too hard, and then the lighting was harder on top of it, making her look extra hard. So this doesn't help her at all with this density. So the main thing is what we're looking at is her front pose. We're looking at the detail in her legs. Now, whether you have hard lighting or not, if you have detail in your front legs, if you have hard lighting, if you have detail in your front legs, it's going to show a little bit harder, but you shouldn't be able to see that much detail in the legs no matter what. Even if the lighting was super soft, you would still see that type of detail in the legs, right? So this is just being a little bit over conditioned in the Texas show, being a little bit too hard. And what I was looking at before was her density. And I was like, she looks really hard, not just in her conditioning, but in her density looks really hard. And when I'm looking at these pictures here, her density still looks hard, but it doesn't look as hard, as dense. And that was the thing that I was looking at prior. I was like, I don't know what type of situation he has over there, because getting someone who's that dense hard enough to show their tie-ins and then trying to not show the density is a very difficult thing to do. It's almost not a possible thing to do. You have to like back off training, and then you still want to show their tie-ins, so you need a lot of training. So all these things are like counteracting each other to get someone's tie-ins to show up. You got to get them certain hardness, and then if that hardness starts showing the density, you end up in a world of problems, right? So it looks like they're finding a better balance of that. She has some decent density, you're starting to see a little bit of separation in those quads, a little bit, but that's kind of acceptable in today's bikini. And you can look at competitors like Amy, who has a lot of detail in her quads, Ashley, who has got detail and density in her quads, and they're still doing really well. A little bit more acceptable than it used to be to have that kind of grain and that kind of slight separation, but it's not overly dense, not overly grainy now. It's kind of one of those right at the max things where they say, okay, don't get any bigger. And that's how they'll say it. They'll say, just don't get any bigger, or they don't get any tighter. They're kind of saying they're not sure if it's too big or it's not, or it's too dense or it's not. It's like right at that pretty limit of maximum bikini. So I think they did a great job with that. The other thing too is how she's posing here. You can see her hand is a little bit farther away from her hip here versus here. Her hand is a little bit closer, which means she's opening up her lat a little bit less. I think they talked to her about that. She does have signs of what they don't want, which is the X frame, right? Which used to be Issa's thing. She had that crazy clavicle width, that high lat that she used to open up, and she used to really open up that lat and show a full-on X frame. We're not going to kid and say that was an hourglass frame. That was a full-on X frame. Very impressive X frame at that, but it was kind of figurey with that X frame. And now she's relaxing it. She still has those lats. She still has that beautiful shape, but she's not opening up her lats like crazy. Everyone cheats a little bit and opens up those lats a little bit to create some shape, and she's doing that, but it's not an obvious. It looks like it's a part of her natural flow, her natural shape. It's a great natural shape, and it does look more hourglassy than X-framed, right? So she did a great job with that, and you can see those slight adjustments that only a trained eye will really see, but she's keeping it more reserved, and it's more so. So this is a totally a different package, not just in fullness, but in posing. We talked about her posing the last show she did too, where she was angling her elbows a little bit weird. Her hand position was a little too high on her hips, pinching a little bit in the shoulder blades at times. So yeah, totally different looks. So let's go ahead and turn her around and look at her from the back of Texas to the back of Klash. Now looking at Issa from the back, now a couple things to consider here. Obviously, she's going to be fuller. She's 3.5 pounds heavier from show to show. But one of the other things is there's some posing adjustments that you might not recognize that are being done. One, I think that she's arching a little bit more in this pose here, and you can see that the upper glute is paying the price for it because she's arching just a little harder in her back pose. So she relaxed it just a hair here, and you're getting a little bit more fullness. Now, I don't know if that's the reason for it or if it's just the fullness in general, but it looks to me like there's a slight adjustment in how much she's pushing as well to get that fullness. But this fullness here on her upper glute does look good. I think that they did a good job with that. I think from here going forward, all she would need to do is actually build some more muscle to be more competitive and have those upper outer edges of her glutes a little bit fuller. And it's just a tiny bit fuller. And that's why I still do think it's going to take her some time to get her throne back and get that Olympia title. I think that's probably more realistic to be a next year thing than a this year thing, based on the fullness that I'm seeing in her glutes now compared to some of the top people. When you look at people like a Laura Lee, a Jennifer, an Ashley, a Maureen, at those upper outer edges of those glutes is where the difference is going to be. Now, the tie-in is getting better. It is getting closer. When we looked over here, her tie-in was really, really good. Now, this is still showing a tie-in with not being fully crazy conditioned. She's still really tight in the conditioning. I'm still seeing vertical separation in her hamstrings here. That's the thing. But it's a lot less than this one. So they are fine tuning it. But if you look side to side, yes, it's fuller. Yes, it's not as overly conditioned, but still it is quite a bit conditioned. You are still seeing vertical separation in the hamstring. You're seeing graininess to the hamstring, but it is better, and they're still maintaining the tie-in. So it still looks like there's room to go there before you lose the tie-in, and that's where things get really, really hard. You're going to have to soften up the hamstrings a little bit, but still keep this tie-in. The question is, how soft can you get those hamstrings, and how full and round can you get those hamstrings before you lose the tie-in, right? Because you're trying to show maximum detail here with showing a soft, full, round hamstring here without any detail or separation. So that's where things get really, really difficult, and it's going to come down to her still needing more development. I don't think it's going to be able to do it based on body fat distribution. I don't think there's going to be a way to do that without building more muscle. And I think that's the key to this, is she just needs more muscle here, so the tie-in will show through a little bit more body fat. That's the only way to get that body fat there, because she needs just a little bit of a curtain of body fat here to get those hamstrings to be nice and soft. But you got to remember, you need muscle to push through that fat, and that's how you're going to get the balance of the tie-in and the hamstring without overly conditioning the hamstrings, right? Otherwise, you kind of don't have an option. You just got to get them lean so the hamstring can show. So the way that she's going to push that muscle through the curtain of fat that she needs to get those hamstrings look is going to have more muscle. And unfortunately, I don't think there's enough time for the Olympia. I think that it's going to be more of a next year project. Though, I hope I'm wrong, because I love Issa. I would love to see her get her title again. I do think that she's going to need just more overall time and development in those key areas, which she's been working for a while. But let's compare her to Ariana. Why did she beat Ariana this weekend with a perfect score? Now, when you compare them side by side, you're going to see some obvious differences, and some of it's just going to be the wow factor, right? That it factor that Issa has. She has those crazy wide clavicles with that really, really good V taper. She has that tiny waistline, and that waistline is crazy small. Ariana has a good waistline too, but when you see next to Issa, you'll see how someone can start looking thicker just because they're who they're next to, She's got a tiny waistline. Any other day of the week, you put her in the gym, you're like, that girl's got a tiny waistline. You put her next to Issa, and you're like, oh, she's got a little bit of a thicker waistline, which she doesn't, right? And that's just the reality of when you get next to someone, and that's how bikini is judged when you're compared to someone. So now, as we talked about in a video prior, Ariana does need some more glute development. So this made it more of a fair comparison because they both need a little bit of glute development. But when you look at them from the front, Issa is a clear winner, and that's how she wins with the perfect score. The main thing is going to be the ratios, the shoulder to waist ratio, the detail on the legs. Though Issa is a little bit pushing the limits of being too detailed on the legs, in this show, it doesn't look too detailed. It looks just about right, just about at that limit. And Ariana looks a little undersized compared to Issa in that overall fullness of those legs too. So in terms of ratio and flow, Issa just has that wow factor. It's hard not to look at Issa when she's next to someone from that front pose. Her front pose is still one of the best in the business. It might be the absolute best in the business, and maybe the best we've kind of ever seen. It's just the ratios are crazy. Structurally, it's just not much you can do against someone like that. And for her, it's just a front back thing, right? Issa wins from the front. She always wins from the front. It comes down to the back. But in this scenario, she actually wins from the front and the back. And when Issa wins from the back, there's just you already know you're going to lose from the front. And that's how she ends up with the perfect score. Now, I knew going into this show, this wasn't going to be the biggest challenge for Issa. Nothing against Ariana, but Ariana's working her way up. She just won her first pro show, and she's going to work her way up. She will be a name soon and become really competitive soon. But you got to remember, this is her first year qualifying for the Olympia. Issa already won the Olympia, right? 3-4 years ago. So now it's kind of, she's building off of that. So of course she's farther ahead. That's just the way that any sport goes. So let's go ahead and look at them from the back. So looking from the back, when you look at the overall fullness, the main thing that I talked about last time was Ariana needing just a little bit more of this middle upper outer edge of the glute here, where the glutes have that kind of area where it's not fully built out yet, where it's not fully complete. Once she gets that, she's gonna be pretty hard to deal with. That is a really, really good glute. I mean, look at that tie-in. Crazy full tie-in without being an overly etched tie-in. That is exactly what you want to be seeing in bikini, that tie-in. Now, in the tie-in alone, she actually beats Issa. She has more of a defined tie-in, more complete tie-in, especially on that right glute than on the left. Full on tie-in. She actually wins in the tie-in area. In the fullness area, Issa wins. When you look at this upper outer edge of the glute, Issa wins there pretty hands down. When you look at the overall shoulder width to waist ratio from the back, it's actually not that far away. Issa doesn't destroy her in that shoulder to waist ratio. This is actually a little bit closer. And this one, that's a tough one. I would like to see that one in person to fully judge who I would go with on just that part of it. And in the overall just density of the muscle, Issa clearly wins on the density of the muscle. And that's another area that Ariana can get a little better at, is getting more density to her overall muscle, where you can see that just a little bit more hardness. Right now she has very pretty muscle, but it still needs just a little bit of density before she starts getting too dense. Now Issa is getting to the point where she's a little bit too dense. In those hamstrings, I will give the win to Ariana based on the roundness and fullness of the hamstring without that detailed graininess separation. So it's a tough one. And it's again, this is where Issa loses ground, where it gets a little bit closer from the back. And when we're talking, this is her first Olympia, and Issa was trying to win the Olympia again, you could start seeing why, okay, that she probably does need another year. If Ariana, I'm hopeful that she'll be a top 20 girl, but her being in the top 10, top 8 her first year, unlikely. She needs more density. She needs more of these areas, and it's so close already from the back. You can see how Issa still needs more work when you compare someone who's her first Olympia, right? Still working her way up, still hasn't reached her potential yet. So when you look at her from the back, it's unfortunately, I still think it's going to need some time, but that's a good thing. It gives her something to work for towards the next year. They know the problems. It's one small area. It's just get the glutes and get the hamstrings a little bit better. It's not going to take a ton of time. It's one area of focus. Everything else is already there. Everything else is like the best on the stage already. Now it's just one area. So a few more things to go for Issa. She's made a big improvement from show to show. I think they're going to fine tune it even better as the year goes on. And so I'm excited to see her at the Olympia. Hopefully she can come up a couple spots this year, but winning the Olympia, I think that would be a little bit of a stretch this year. And now we fly over to Tokyo, Japan, where we see Shuai versus Eureka for a real throwdown. I mean, I was shocked at seeing the pictures over in Japan. I mean, what is in the water in Japan? These girls look incredible. I think that people underestimate how strong the talent is in Japan. This is a serious throwdown in Japan. And I think that the talent that we're not seeing from Japan is just due to the lack of shows and the travel that obviously is more difficult going from Japan to different shows, because these girls in Japan are really, really good. Very impressive. I was in Japan a few years ago. I think it was 2018, maybe 19. And the talent level has definitely risen in this show. I'll be going to Japan again, so hopefully I'll see you guys there. I think it's after the Olympia this year, so hopefully I'll see a few of you there, and we'll get to do some posing and whatnot. But very excited to see it because the talent level of this show, crazy, crazy high. So let's go ahead and do a breakdown of Eureka versus Shuai. And congratulations to Eureka getting back into the Olympia. She's a top 15 athlete, so no surprise that she won. But it was a surprise with how much closer it was than I thought it was going to be. I thought she was going to go there and just, mop the floor with everyone because the talent level wasn't as high. Not easy at all. These girls are so good. It's shocking the level of physique you're going to see out there. Now I'm just going to pull up Shuai versus Eureka, but Shuai it was not an easy contest at all. So let's go ahead and take a look at Eureka versus Shuai. So first off, looking at both of them, great hourglass shapes. Now, I will say that Shuai is putting her arm out a little bit. A key sign that her lat is opening up maybe too much, and she might be showing more of an X frame and out muscling Eureka a little bit. And she does look fuller up top. I will say that's one thing I do see from her is that her upper body to lower body balance is just a bit off, but I don't know if it's necessarily off or it's how she's posing and she's making her upper body look a lot bigger. And then that therefore is making her lower body look smaller, creating that imbalance. And it's actually not a true imbalance, but just a posing imbalance. And that's one of the ways that she's going to be beating Eureka. Now, I do think that Eureka is also posing with her arm too far out. And if you look at the differences we just talked about Issa and how close her arm is in the American market and how they're posing, their arm is right at their side. There is no, what we call teapotting, where that arm is out, right? So that is something that you're just not seeing anymore at that upper level because girls are not opening up their lats like they were for a couple years. So that's something that I think they can both fix. Now, looking at them from just standing back and looking at them on the upper body, I actually really like Shuai. I think that her fullness looks really great. She has that soft, very pretty muscle. Her core detail isn't too much, but you can still see a little bit of abs. And actually, I like Shuai more from the front, from the upper body, than Eureka. Actually, by quite a bit, actually. If I was just judging the upper body from the front, I would actually have Shuai with a perfect score over Eureka. Now, from the lower body is where things change. Looking at the fullness of the glutes with Eureka versus Shuai, I think that Eureka shows a little bit more density to her glute in her front profile, more completeness to that glute in the front profile. She's showing me some nice roundness to her hamstrings versus Shuai is just showing me the front of her quad, and I'm not seeing any of the nice roundness to her hamstrings, which is okay, but I still want to see some shape to that hamstring. She's got great legs. She's got great definition, great pretty muscle to her legs. I want to see some of it in that front pose. I want to see a little bit more of that glute. So twist your hips over a little bit, show more roundness to those glutes, show more roundness of that hamstring. I think it's going to help her out, especially because when she's showing the quad facing the front, it narrows her body up a little bit, throwing off the balance a little bit more, making her legs look smaller than they actually are. So from the bottom half, Eureka wins with a perfect score, in my opinion. From the upper half, from the front, Shuai wins with a perfect score, in my opinion. Who do you give it to? That's a tough one. It's a really tough decision on that one. I would edge towards Eureka because Bikini is one from the glutes. If I have to pick an area to make the deciding factor, obviously I'm not there too. I would actually let the posing be the deciding factor, stage presence, that it factor be the deciding factor for me. And this is something we're not going to be able to judge from pictures when it's that close. And now looking at them from the back, there is a noticeable difference between them. It's a little bit farther away from the back. So let's go ahead and do a breakdown and look at them, working our way from the top to the bottom. So First off, the things we want to look for is we want to look for that nice shoulder width. They both have great shoulder width. Eureka could have gotten that hair off of her shoulder, had better hair control, so we can see both shoulders. But there's no problem there. You can still see both shoulders just fine. That's just a minor error. Probably got caught on the oil or something. But you can still see the shoulders, so I don't think that's going to hurt her at all. The hair is cut in the right spot. We can still see both of their lower backs and still see the ratios. From the upper back part, I don't see a real difference between the two. I do think that Shuai's waistline looks a little smaller just due to the ratios of her having probably a slightly wider clavicle width. Looking at her posing, though, that's an area where Shuai can make some improvements. Her elbows are a little bit too far out. I'm seeing the palms of her hands versus Eureka, nice and tight, not seeing any palms of the hands. And they're still both showing really good hourglass shape without opening up their lats like crazy. And I think that Shuai is actually opening up just a little bit on her lats, and that's why she's getting more of that kind of scarecrow elbow position with those palms showing a little bit too, because she's trying to flare her lats a little bit. The judges don't want to see that. They want to see a little bit of natural shape, natural hourglass, but they don't want to see you flaring your lats. And I think she's just what we call cheating it, where you're getting just a little bit of cheat to it, so you're showing a little bit from the back, but you have to be more secretive than that. You have to be more hidden than that, than actually just opening up and where you to the point where your elbows are pointing out, because it's just a tell sign of what you're actually doing. So Eureka, from the back pose, from the upper body, I'm going to say in terms of the physique, it's very, very close. But in terms of the posing, it's very far, and Eureka wins this one from the upper back because she's presenting how we want someone to present. Remember, they're saying, who are we going to send to the Olympia from this? You want everything to be perfect. Posing can hurt you. Posing is, hey, she's not going to win the Olympia with that type of posing. Let's send her, right? That type of scenario, because everything matters when you're trying to send them to the Olympia. So same thing with when you girls are trying to get pro cards and you look at someone and they're like, oh, the judge might say, hey, that girl might be the best physique, but she's not even ready to be a pro yet. She's not even posing right yet. You know, how are they going to give her the pro card, right? Same thing happens at all levels. So everything needs to be perfect. She is very, very close. I would love to see Shuai. Shuai, if you're ever in Vegas, come out here. I'll help you pose. We'll fine tune this because you have an amazing physique. You're an inch away from greatness here, and you're definitely pushing Eureka in this contest. So looking at the tie-ins, that one's going to be a toss-up. Honestly, that could go either way. When you look at the tie-ins on Shuai, very crisp, very good tie-in. It's at that border where they're just starting to etch, but they're not fully etched. I could see her losing this show because she was a little too much, a little too muscular, posing a little too big, posing a little too much lat width, just a little bit too much of a tie-in. Everything just a little too much, not a lot too much, just barely there. Because if you look at the tie-in detail, she actually beats Eureka quite a bit on that tie-in detail. So I think that Eureka stayed within the bikini parameters. I think that Shuai just ever so slightly passed them, and there was probably a judge there with a very trained eye, and he said, hey, that's just a little too much. I'm not going to let bikini progress to the next level. I'm still going to reward you for this physique because it's a hard-to-earn physique. It's still the second best here, but you went a little too far with things. You need to tone it down a little bit. If you would have toned it down a little bit, you might have beaten Eureka, right? That's the thing. A lot of times, you girls, when you get judges' feedback and you tell it to your coaches, a lot of times athletes will tell it to their coaches. It's kind of like they're blaming the coach. Oh, the judge said I should have been fuller. I'm like, just because you were a little bit fuller, the judge said you were a little bit fuller, doesn't mean you would have won. Just because they said, oh, you need to be fuller, that doesn't mean, oh, that's the ticket and that's why you lost that day. You still might have lost to the girl that was there. That's what I was really happy to hear judges' feedback from Jack earlier this year. He told Elizabeth, he said, you need a little bit more fullness, but even if you had the fullness, there was no way you're beating Jordan today. Like, she was too good. And I think that more judges need to be more upfront about that, because in this scenario, it could have been that way, though. If you said, hey, if you didn't push it that far, you probably or might have beaten Eureka. That's one of those scenarios, but that's not always the scenario, girls. And I just want to give you that advice because it does happens to me too, where a girl will come back and say, oh, the judge said I was a little too conditioned or whatever, right? And I'm like, okay, that's cool. We can soften you up. But even if you softened up, doesn't mean you would have beaten that girl. She was still better than you, no matter what you did. You just weren't there yet, right? So it's just not possible for you to beat her yet. Maybe one day, but not yet, right? But in this scenario, I think actually it could have been possible. I would love to see her 100% in that bikini criteria, posing 100% right. I think that she has a really strong chance of actually pushing Eureka and maybe making it. I don't know what the score was. I looked for the scorecards. Might have been closer than I thought. But to me, when you start really breaking it down, you see the differences of someone staying within the bikini parameters and someone just very slightly getting past them. So a great battle in Japan. Shocking battle in Japan, actually. The talent level there, I mean, craziness. I'm excited to go to Japan later this year and see where that talent's at. Hope to meet quite a few of you there. If you're from there, leave in the comments below. We'll come out and maybe set up a posing seminar or something. Anyway, that is what I got for you guys on this Bikini Weekend recap. Thank you guys so much for watching. TeamElitePhysique.com for worldwide online contest prep with me. I'll talk to you guys later.